Hi, and welcome to Love on the Autism Spectrum Season 2. If you're a regular listener, please feel free to jump to about the minute and a half mark to skip this introduction. If you're new here, I want to say I'm your host, Barbara Lazzaroni, licensed marriage and family therapist, neurodivergent coach, and creator of the Neurodivergent Spiral of Life. Please call me Blaze. All my friends do. This podcast is for autistic adults, adults with ADHD or complex trauma, and the partners who love them, as well as neurodivergent couples, especially those who are tired of being told to communicate better, try harder, or fix themselves in systems that were never designed for how they're wired. Here, we slow things down. We talk about real relationships, real nervous systems, and real life without fixing, pathologizing, or rushing your process. I bring clinical experience along with decades of lived relationship experience to create a calm, emotionally intelligent space where nothing about you needs to be defended, explained, or justified. Each episode is an invitation to understand yourself, your partner, and your patterns with more compassion, clarity, and choice. We make lots of room for nervous system safety, emotional truth, and the patterns that actually shape neurodiverse relationships without blame, pressure, or performance. This isn't therapy advice. It's lived experience, clinical wisdom, and steady support for those of us who are wired differently. So take a breath, settle in. I am so glad you're here. And just a quick note before we dive in. This podcast is for reflection and education, not therapy. Licensing doesn't create a therapeutic relationship, and I'm only licensed in the state of California. Any client examples I share are purely fictional, and all of the tools or stories are meant to support your self-reflection, not replace personalized care. If you're in crisis or need immediate support, please reach out to a local professional or call 988 in the United States. Okay, now let's get to today's episode. Hello and welcome to Season 2 of Love on the Autism Spectrum. Today, this is episode number 17, entitled When You Start Seeing Yourself in the Checklist. And this week is primarily about female autism, one of the things that goes so much undiagnosed even in our world today. And as we wrap up Autism Awareness Week, I want to say thank you for allowing me and being with me and supporting me as we talk about autism all month. And next month, when we reconvene, we'll go back to the neurodivergent spiral of life. Um, and yet, it was so important for me to really honor Autism Awareness Month. So, this episode again is for women specifically. So, as we slow down together, this one is for the moment that something clicks when you're maybe watching a video or hearing another woman describe their experience, or maybe reading a list somewhere and you think, whoa, this feels like me. Not just a little bit, a lot of it. Yeah, in a way that's really hard to ignore. So today we're going to talk about what happens when you start seeing yourself in the autism checklist and why that moment can bring both relief and grief. And you can also, I want to encourage you, if you want to take a self-screener, you can do that. I'll include the self-screener link in my show notes for this week. You could also go to my website, and on my website, there is the screener for women and girls specifically, because autism does look differently in girls. And for many adults, this recognition that they may be autistic, adult females, um, doesn't come early. It tends to come later, after years of adapting, after years of functioning, quite frankly, and over functioning, years of learning who you needed to be. And then something shifts. You start seeing the patterns. You feel the exhaustion and the overthinking and the effort it takes to stay connected and the effort it takes to like respond and keep up. And then suddenly things start to make sense. A lot of the assessments that I do here in the state of California, most of my clients are women. And most of my clients are women over 40, many as old as 70, really looking for an assessment and a diagnosis. And again, that's not required at all. And yet some people really want to understand who they are. So I'm thinking of someone that I once worked with. I'm going to call her Marianne. Marianne had always been described as someone who was very thoughtful. She was capable, she was responsible, she was easy to be around. However, on the inside, she felt like she was working so much harder than everyone else. She studied conversations. She watched other people talk, watched their body movements, watched their their subtle cues, listened to their tone and their pitch. She replayed those interactions again over and over in her head, and sometimes she adjusted herself so that she could fit in. Marianne also told me she even practiced some of those conversations in a mirror. Or sometimes she even heard herself using those same words that other people had used. Mm. She didn't think of this as masking. She just thought of it as being a good person, of paying attention. And that's what we ask girls to do specifically. That's how we socialize them here, especially in the United States. We we socialize them to interact with other girls, especially when they're very young, and follow what other girls do. We wear the hair the same. We want the same clothes. We talk in the same way. And as she aged, again, she just thought she was being a good person, being aware, being considerate. And then she realized, oh my goodness, this is so exhausting. And then one night she came across the checklist. And as she read through it, something happened. Not all at once, but slowly, line by line, as she read this little checklist and she felt some level of recognition. She's like, oof, I do that. That's me. That explains something. And then she stopped because the recognition just didn't bring clarity. It brought emotion, a lot of emotion. She began to notice that many of her friends were actually neurodivergent. They told her about how they maybe had an assessment when they were younger or, sometime maybe a few years ago, but she just thought it was them. It wasn't her. She didn't really recognize many of the cues. And, this is where masking becomes so important. Devon Price, in his work on masking, describes how many autistic adults, especially those identified later in life, learn to adapt so thoroughly that their natural responses become difficult to recognize, even to themselves. Their parents will say, of course you're not autistic. No, I didn't have any problems when you were a kid, honey. No, you didn't line up the cars. No, you didn't do that stuff. So parents are saying no, 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 no. But girls, it looks autism. Sorry, I wasn't trying to describe it as an it. autism looks different in girls. Masking just isn't behavior, it's an identity level adaptation. It's learning. And the people who are most often missed for an autism in the younger grades for having um, being on the autism spectrum, the people that are most missed are girls, gender nonconforming people, or people that are BIPOC. Why? Because we as a society have still not fully understood that when we began testing many years ago and looking at autism, it was only in boys. It looks different in girls and in women. So, this identity level adaptation, it's all about learning how to respond, how to relate, how to be perceived. That's how we socialize little girls. We teach them these things, cross your legs at your ankles. Don't spread out your knees. Do it this way. All of this are ways to preserve connection. And as little girls, we're socialized that connection is so important. And so that over time it can become so familiar that it doesn't feel like something that you're doing. It's just that that's the way you're supposed to react and act. It feels more like just who you are. So when this level of recognition begins, boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, it can feel disorienting because it raises a deeper question. What is me? Who am I? How have I been adapting? And for how long? Oof, that's a lot. So if you're in this moment right now as you're listening, where things might be starting to make sense but also feel uncertain, I want you to know this. You don't have to rush to define this. You're simply allowed to notice right now. Notice is a part of the process. It's actually first part of the change process. We have to become aware of something before we can change it. So this is the moment in the in the podcast that I want to tell you, hey, if this conversation is resonating, please go and explore my other work. On my blog post this week is all about the female autism checklist, what it really means when you start seeing yourself. That's the title. And then on Substack this week, I'm writing something, the essay is entitled The Relief and the Grief, Recognizing Yourself. So, and if you're wanting something structured, I also offer a screener on my website just for women and girls. I talked about it a little bit earlier here in the podcast. It's called the GQ-ASC. It's a self-assessment questionnaire specifically designed for adult women on the autism spectrum. And I'll put the link, like I said, in the show notes. It takes into account this self-assessment questionnaire the unique ways that autism traits may show up in women, especially those who have been underdiagnosed or misdiagnosed due to gender bias in traditional tools. There's a lot of gender bias in some of those traditional tools, so I invite you to look at this one. This one's really special. You can take it on my website to better understand your own experiences and to see if this lens fits for you. Even if you've never received a formal diagnosis, it's just something you want to do. And again, like I said, I'll share the link in the show notes. And with Marianne, we didn't rush into labeling. We stayed with recognition. We stayed with what felt true, what felt familiar, what had been consistent over time. And slowly, for her, something shifted. She began to soften a bit towards herself. The exhaustion that she'd been feeling for so long really began to make sense. The effort, all that effort she'd been putting out began to make sense, and the differences made sense. And then, along with that, her grief emerged. Grief for how long she had worked this hard without understanding why. Grief for the parts of herself that she had set aside. Yeah, the parts that she had set aside and just forgot about because she wanted to fit in. Mm-hmm. Oh. Grief for the years she thought she was too much or even not enough. So for home play this week, if you're in the space, here's something for you to try. Instead of asking, is this me? Am I officially trying to diagnose myself or assess myself? Try asking this instead. What part of this feels true in my lived experience? Let that be enough for right now. And again, I want to share something from my book that I published last year. It's entitled Unmasked Self-Acceptance, 365 Days of Coming to Home to Who You Really Are. And it's called A Year of Radical Support for Neurodivergent Adults and the People Who Love Them, full of healing, clarity, and wholeness. You can find it on Amazon. And as I opened up the book today, it landed in month 2, day number 55. And here's the affirmation for today. It seems to resonate what we're talking about today. The affirmation is, I can grow without hating where I've been. I can grow without hating where I've been. This is part of the process for many people when they get a diagnosis. They actually share, that when they see this, maybe even in a self-assessment tool and a checklist, they're like, whoa, wow, I've been hating who I was. Why did I do this to myself? And the quote for today, let me also share that from this book. Healing, it does not require self-blame. That's just shame in a lab coat. Yeah. You don't have to blame yourself. You don't have to blame your parents. You don't have to blame your teachers. What we do is we feel the sadness or whatever it is that, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry you didn't know sooner. I'm so sorry that you didn't have this awareness and yet you do now. What is possible now that you know? You don't need the blame. Allow this to be your space for what's next. Doesn't have to be freedom right away. Doesn't have to be, woohoo, I have a diagnosis of female autism spectrum disorder. Or maybe that's your truth. Recognition itself does not require certainty. It begins with honesty. It really does. So if I can help you in that level of honesty, whether that be for yourself or in your relationship, I invite you to reach out. I'm here. I like to tell my clients I'm doing this work until the day I die or the day I lose my marbles, whichever comes first. And then I also tell them that I rely on them to tell me if I'm losing my marbles. I'm just being silly. That's part of my humor. So yes, I look forward to meeting you. Send me an email, DM me, find me on Substack, buy a copy of the book. Let me know how it resonates. I'd love to support you in any way I can. And this is just one way on this podcast. So to learn more about this topic and to explore my other blog posts, therapy, coaching, and assessment offerings, please visit my website, Love on the Autism Spectrum. And thank you for listening today. I look forward to seeing you in the month of May, where we come back to the neurodivergent spiral of life. And thank you for helping me close out and celebrate Autism Awareness Month. Take care. Be well. Bye now.